We begin the current Daf, Mesechta Nedarim Daf Samach. We begin the 8th parak in Mesechta Nedarim parak Koinim Yayin, which continues on the theme of the previous parakim, discussing what's included in the neder. Here we get into not regarding as the previous parakim defining the object itself that the neder was taken on, but regarding the parameters of the time span that the neder is going to be on. What did you mean when you said a topic of time? Today's daf. Sometimes we discuss in today's daf the distinction between if you say, and again, as we see in the laws of the Nedarim, your wording is very important. If you say Koinim Yayin, I take a neder of wine shani time hayom today, or if you say Koinim Yayin shani time yom echad one day, what's in between today or one day in regards to the extent of the time of the neder? Now, Rabbi Yirmiyah tells us that even though you say for today, like when it's going to get dark, you have to be shoyl, you have to go to the chacham to permit it. Which the Gemara is going to wonder, why would you have to permit it? You said today, and once it gets dark, we know in Jewish law it's already the next day. So Rabbi Yisrael is going to tell us because it's exer hayom shum yom echad. If you say today, you might confuse it with one day, and one day is for a 24-hour period, which is even at nighttime. Whereas Ravina says no. Chum only made the gezer because they also agree with Rav Nosson that a neder is undesirable. And you took a neder, together with the fact that there's room for error, it's with the combination of those two principles that makes us say that, okay, you have to go ahead and be shayl to the chacham. What happens if, let's say, you say, koin yayin shani toim yoim, so that's the Gemara's question, is that yoim is yoim kahayoim, like today, which is only asar chetechjich, or is yoim like yom echad, and therefore would be asar me'es le'ez? That is a Gemara, that's a question in the Gemara. And one of the important principles that comes up in today's daf, Rabbi Nosson is teaching that we've said many times, if someone takes a neder, it's kilo bon the bum, it's as if he built a private altar. And if he fulfills it, it's kilo makro carbon, as if he sacrificed a carbon. In other words, you're just doubling down on your sin, on your mistake that you're doing, that you took a neder, and now you're going ahead with it. We begin the current Daf Samach, again 13 lines down, by the top of the Amid, we begin the 8th parak Koinim Yayin. Says the Mishnah. Koinim Yayin. Some say it says I take a carbon, like a carbon. Koinim is a nickname for a carbon. I take a isser of yayin. Shani toimayim that I'm going to taste today. So the halacha is eina aser ela achetechshin. He's only forbidden up until it gets dark. Of course, since he said today, it's only until the day ends, which is up until it gets dark. Because, like we know in Jewish law, it's already the next day when it gets dark. Now, let's say he says Shabbazu this week. Let's say he's on Tuesday. He's in the middle of the week, and he says this week. So Asur b'chol Shabbos. He's forbidden all the days of the week, and b'Shabbos, the day of Shabbos itself, is she'avra, is included in the isser of the previous week. In other words, when someone says this week, he means all the coming weekdays with Shabbos. Shabbos caps it off. Shabbos is the end of the week. So therefore, Shabbos is included in that week. Now, let's say someone is in the middle of the month, and he says, Chodesh Zeh, this month. So the neder is going to prohibit him for the whole month. And B'Rish Chodesh lehaba. B'Rish Chodesh is going to be not capping off like Shabbos does. That's not part of the month, the days of the month. That's including the Isser. Rather, it's considered as part of the next month, and therefore it's going to be permitted. Let's say it says Shana Zu, that this year is the neder. So Asur b'chol Shana is forbidden the whole year, meaning up until Rosh Chodesh Tishrei. But Rosh Hashanah, Rosh Chodesh Tishrei, the new year, La'asad Lavai, is part of the future, and that is not included in the Isser that he took for this year. Let's say it says Shavua Zeh, this Shemitah cycle, which is a period of 7 years. So Asur b'chol Shavua is forbidden up until you finish the 6 years of the Shemitah cycle. And V'Shvius, the Shemitah year itself, is Sha'avra, is considered as part of the previous Shemitah cycle, and therefore your prohibition of your neder of tasting wine is going to be also for the 7th year, which has a halacha like the previous Shemitah cycle. Now, but let's say Vim Amar, and now let's say all the terminologies we said, you say it different. You don't say Hayoim, Shabbazu, Chodesh Zeh. Rather, you say Yom Echad, one day, Shabbos Achas, 1 week, Chodesh Echad, 1 month, Shana Achas, 1 year, Shavua Echad, 1 Shemitah cycle. Then it's Asur Miyoim Liyoim. Then you're actually forbidden from day to day. In other words, one cycle of a year, one cycle of a day. And therefore you're forbidden for 1 day for a 24-hour period. Where the Rush says, if you're middle of the day and you say 1 day, you're forbidden up until that timing, or that month. Let's say you're in the 8th month and you say Chodesh Alai, so it's forbidden up until Ches L'Chodesh Haba, which the two ways of understanding. would that be me'es le'es literally, like until 9 a.m. of the 8th day, or no, that wouldn't be us me'es le'es. It would be only up until the shkia, the nightfall of the 8th day. But upon the one thing is, it's not till the end of the month. It's a month, which a month is a certain amount of time. A day is a certain amount of time. So wherever you are, we take a day from there. That's the difference in these terminologies. Now, the Mishnah says, what happens if someone says Ad HaPesach? He says, okay, I am taking this neder up until Pesach. So then the halacha is, and actually the rounds for this is on the Samach Aleph Manaf, as we'll actually explain it primarily in the next daf. So the words are actually all there, and it's on Samach Aleph. So let's say someone says up until Pesach. So he's asat shegi. It's forbidden up until you reach Pesach, because the way people speak, and again, we said in the Nadarim, it's all about how people speak. Ad is v'loy ad b'chlal. Up until means not including. So if you say, I'm not going to drink wine. Biz Pesach, it means up until Pesach, not including Pesach. Now, let's say you say ad sheyehei, until that it will be. Oh, then it's asat sheyetze. Then it's going to be forbidden up until Pesach is over. Because ad sheyehei sounds like ad sheyehei kule, until the whole thing will be. So ad sheyehei Pesach means until the whole Pesach is going to pass. Now let's say you say, so we had one terminology that sounds like up until, one terminology that sounds including. What happens if you say ad pnei ha-Pesach, until the face of Pesach, or could mean before, pnei means like lifnei. So Remeir, he says, asat she'yeh, it's going to be forbidden up until you reach Pesach. Why? So we'll see this on the next daf, because Remeir holds that although you could technically say that ad pnei means up until 1 second before the end of the last day of Pesach, so it's still like lifnei, we don't say that. Because a person would not put himself in a situation of doubt on the second day and the third day and the rest of the days of Pesach. So when he says ad pnei Pesach, he must have been before the first day of Pesach. So therefore it's only usher until you reach Pesach. He says no, ad sheyetze, until you finish Pesach. Because he holds a person would put himself in a situation of doubt, and could be when you said ad pnei Pesach means up until right before which part of Pesach? The last few moments of Pesach. That's when you're not drinking wine is going to go to, and therefore that's Machlekes Reb Meir and Reb Yossi. Now the Gemara explains the halacha of the Mishnah. We said in the Mishnah that koyin yain shani koyin v'chulu that I'm going to taste today. So he said that you're only going to be usher up until shetechsha. That's the primary halacha, because today means today, and tonight is already not today anymore. But Amr b'Yirmiyah bar Abba, he says look at shetechsha, but when it gets nighttime, tzarich she'el chacham. You have to go to this chacham and be shoyl on your neder to be matur. Meaning, although Meikar did when you say today it's already permitted when it's nighttime, as we said in the Mishnah, even though rabbinically you need to be shoyl on it. Says the Gemara, my time. What would be the reason why do you have to be shoyl on it? So Omer Yisvi says it's a gzeira. It's a rabbinic decree. Because when you're saying Hayom, which means today, which means up until nightfall, because it might be confused Mishum Yom Echad with 1 day, as we continue with days, which as the Rav explains. If you're going to permit when it's lishatech without being shoyl, you might make the mistake and do the same thing when he said Yom Echad, that you're going to say it's permitted when it gets nightfall, because a person usually doesn't differentiate the syntax and the phonetic differences that you're saying to say what's the difference between Yom Echad, Hayom, Yom Gezut Hand, Memektin Banach Shon, right? But that's only if you say Hayom. You say Yom Echad 1 day, no, that's for a 24-hour period. So therefore we said even like Shetech be shoyal by the Chacham. But on that, Amalei Abaye said to Rabbi Yosef, if that's the case, that you could turn for confusion. So Ligzer b'yoyim echad. So you should make the same gezeirus the other way around. You should make a gezeira when the guy says yoyim echad 1 day, that it should be aser even when it's already your 24-hour period up until nighttime. Mishum hayoim, when you're going to say today is aser until nighttime. So when you say yoyim echad, so you tell me if it takes the neder at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, it's a 24-hour period till the next day 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Why? Should say it's us until nightfall, because Hayoim is till nightfall, and you might confuse the two of them. So now Rabbi Yosef said to him, no. Hayoim, when the case we're discussing, when you say today, B'yoim echad, in regards to the case of when you're saying 1 day, that's michlef. That gets confusing, because if you're going to be permitted to him when he says Hayoim at nighttime without being shayil, then you're going to come to him even when he says Yom echad. But Yom echad b'Hayoim le'michlef. In the case of 1 day, in today, that's not going to be confusing. Why? Because when you say Yom Echad, you already went and you already kept your neder for 24 hours already. So you already know what you did. You did already 24 hours, and that's not going to be confused to permit when you say Hayoim before it gets dark. That's how the Ran explains. Now, the Ran just interestingly says that today, when someone takes a private tainus, he fasts, that it's only from morning till evening. And even so, when it gets dark, we permit him to eat without being shoyl. And we're not going to, maybe he's going to say a tainus for your mechad for one day. He says that's because it's well known that the halacha of a tainus is like this. And it's just not like in the Nadarim, because Chacham already made that time that's how long a tainus goes for. So therefore, even if you can permit it from when it gets nighttime, it's not going to be confused with taking a neder for one day, because the laws of tainus and the Nadarim are different, and not going to make a confusion. But he brings from the Rashba that he doesn't like what the Rashba says. The Rashba writes that the reason why we're going through this halacha of hayoim for yom echad, why we make it the gezerah, because some of the day was permitted for this person in the beginning of the day when he said yom echad. Right? He took the neder 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Up until that point was mutter. And since they're similar, they're going to become too confused. But by a tainus, where you were forbidden already from the beginning of the day, so that's not similar to yom echad, that people are going to say that, oh, that's why you're permitted over here when it gets nighttime, because you were already forbidden at the beginning of the day. But by yom echad, one day where your issur was did not take effect in the beginning of the day, so that's not appropriate that I should be permitted when it gets nighttime.
Where does Mixus Yom Kikulo come in? Not in the Nedarim.
Well, he's just saying it like as a svara. People are going to say that they're not going to be confusing it because they're different. The tainus you took already from the morning, whereas when you took the neder over here,
and the other day, guy says I'm going to fast 1 day or 2 day. Mixus Yom Kikulo doesn't come in. I'm saying if he says it right now and he fulfills it to this evening.
So the Ran's actually going to say something similar. He says that the reason why he doesn't like the Rashba is because if someone says Hayom today, that you're telling me that that our Gemara is saying that when it gets dark you're gonna have to make a she'ela. He says, well, aren't we talking about that the guy took the net before Alois Hashacha? Where he was forbidden at the beginning of the day, like
not shy.
Rather, he says obviously you have to see the pshat like we said, and he says for that reason also if someone is mekabel on himself a tainus for Yom Echad b'Shabbos 1 day during the week, you don't obligate him to fast for 24 hours. Because for tainus is different. Chacham, that's what he had in mind, which was before Alois Hashachar, up until it gets dark, and therefore the Ran doesn't say like the pshat of the Rash, but again he just says like we said that Hayoim could be confused with Yom Echad because you're going to think that Yom Echad is the same thing, but Yom Echad and Yom that wouldn't be confused because the guy might have fasted already 24 hours, not because the Svar of the Rashba, because of that there's time that was permitted, and therefore you're going to confuse the two of them. Now, that's one pshat, that of Rabbi Yosef. But Ravina disagrees. Amar Ravina, it says, Amar Meremer said to me, that Hachi Amar Abuch, this is what your father said, Mishmid Rabbi Yosef, named Rabbi Yosef. That there's another piece of it, another shtickle. Kaman Azla, according to whom is it going, the Shmaitid Rabbi Yirmiyah Bar Abba that we quoted, that says that you have to do She'ela when it gets dark. There's another piece. It's Kirab Nasan. In other words, why do you have to be She'el by the Chacham when you say today? It's not just because of Gzeira. Because the truth is, it's not so common for people to make such a confusion that to say, when you say Hayoim you could eat by nighttime, but Yom Echad we're going to confuse. That's not really so similar. But since you took a neder and you anyways didn't do appropriately, like Reb Nassim, the Tanakh learned the Brisa, Nassim he says that Kol HaNeder whoever takes a neder, Kilabana Bama says he built a private altar. V'amakaimen, and whoever fills the kilomakter allows after he went and he sacrificed on it. So although we would never really have just made a Gezerah, and we wouldn't be stringent to require you to do She'elah, because, meaning for Halacha Rabbi Nassim itself, because then every neder, when it comes to time, you should have to say, be sure by the Chacham. But wherever it's somewhat of a Gezerah, that maybe, because you could come to confuse, then we're stringent and then we penalize. So, in other words, according to Rabbi, there's really two principles. One is the concern of Mechlef, but that itself is not enough, not like the way the first version of Risa was. A neder, it's also because a neder is undesirable. And the combination of those two, that's why this halacha was said that when you say Hayom, you have to be shoyl at nighttime. And that's what the Ran explains. He says the nafkamina of this is, who cares? Okay, it's because of one svar or two svars, what's different? The nafkamina is if you made a neder for a mitzvah. For example, let's say you took a neder to learn to perform a mitzvah, then you don't have to have shayla because it's a good thing. So this Reb Nosson compares it to Obama, that's for something else. So according to Rabbi Yosef, you would have to have Sheila Chacham because it's still Ikka Gzer because of Michla. According to Rabbeinu, you wouldn't have to have Sheila Chacham because this is for a desirable thing. So therefore you wouldn't have both principles. Now would be the nafkamina, says the Ran, between these two different interpretations of this halacha of why the that you have to have Sheila to the Chacham. Now, we said in the Mishnah, if you say Shabbazu this week, now Asmachal Shabbos, cool, we said you can be forbidden the whole week. It says the word Pshita. Obviously Shabbos, we know Shabbos is the end of the week. It's included this week. Says no, about them would you say Yomid Shabbat Kama, the days of the week. In other words, since the days of the week we call the week, and it's called the weekday, so you would say that it's only intended for them and not to make himself forbidden on wine on the coming Shabbos. That Shabbazu means including Shabbos also. Okay, next halacha was Chodesh Zeh. So this month, Asmachal Chodesh, you're forbidden for the whole month, and Rosh Chodesh Lahaba. And Rosh Chodesh is for part of the coming month. It's not considered as part of this past month. Sigmar said, obviously we know Rosh Chodesh is Mahaiptun Denai Chodesh. What's the Havamina to say that it would be part of the previous month? Sigmar says, no, it is necessary. When's necessary? L'Chodesh Chaser. For a lacking month, like we have this month, which we're going to have tonight already, is Rosh Chodesh. Yeah, but the Chodesh that's coming after the Chodesh of his Neder is a Chodesh Chaser. And if that's the case, that means the Chodesh that he took a Neder is Mali. What does that mean? That means to say that the coming, meaning tonight, Rosh Chodesh Tevis, is going to have 2 days Rosh Chodesh. That means to say this month is a Mali. We have 30 days in it, right? There's always 29 and a half days. You can't have 29 and a half days. You do either 29, which is a Chodesh Chaser, or 30 days, which is a Chodesh Mali. Now, the first day of Rosh Chodesh, what's today, what's tonight, what's Shabbos going to be called? What is it? It's Lamed Kislev. Aleph Teves is going to be on Sunday, the second day of Rosh Chodesh. Oh, Ma'adatem, what would you say? Rosh Chodesh, L'Sha'avahava. The Eshter took Rosh Chodesh, the first Rosh Chodesh, is filling up the 30th day of the previous month. So you would think to say, Litzer, that Rosh Chodesh should be forbidden in the Neder of this month. Kamash Malan, that's a big Chiddush. The Kadu Inshi Reish Yarcha, people call it the beginning of the month. And therefore, even though it's really part of the first month, but since you call it Rosh Chodesh, it's going to be permitted because by Nadarim you go after Lashon B'nei Adam. And since in the human vernacular, in the people's language, they call it the beginning of the month, even though on the dating it's really part of the previous month, that's not going to be included in the Neder. Which actually the Ran parenthetically says, from here we learn that B'shtoris also, when you're writing in the day of the first month, you write on the day of that month, and you don't write the previous month. And if you do that, meaning even though it's really part of the previous month, the shtar is going to be predated. It's going to be possible because the shtar is made in the second month.
You're right. Rosh Chodesh not Lami.
And he explained. They're going to say that beforehand it was made because he says that you don't have the first day of the second month to be called in the human language, meaning by the way people speak, on the previous month.
What do you do? Which one do you do?
So you're going to write that it's the next month, not the previous month.
How do you write it?
You write, so he says that on B'yom Chodesh Hasheni, he says on the day of the second month, he says you write B'yom Sheni L'Chodesh Ploni, and the following day is Yom Shlishi, meaning he says you're calling it the first day of that month. You have to know, but that's how he says it. And if you write day 2, it's going to be possible because it's predated. Because regarding Nadarim, you say that the first day of a Chodesh Chaser is considered Reish Yarcha. It says the same thing we say regarding stars. Because the Gemara says at the end of the parak we compare stars to Nadarim. And so too, regarding judgments, that stars are Chiyuvin, we go Balash B'nei Adam. But it means in the Rashba, in the name of Taisis, that by Gittin, you have to write Yom Shleishim L'Chodesh Tishrei, which is Reish Chodesh Marcheshim, to be Machna. So he does say that. He's comparing it to Nadarim, which is saying that the way people speak, which is people call it Rosh Chodesh, can't call it the previous month anymore, because that would be considered a muktim, like you're writing it like as if it's the previous month. Now we said Shanazu. Said another halacha was that if you say this year, so Asmachal Shana Kuli, you can be forbidden in the entire year. Okay, but really it's just the ending off of those categories. But we had said Yom Echad and we said Hayyom. So the Gemara has an interesting question. Let's say it doesn't say hayoim, and doesn't say yom echad. He just says, I'm taking a neder of wine that I'm tasting today. It's hard to translate. Yoim, a day. What's the halacha? What's the question? So dini kahayoim is the halacha that is like today, which is permitted when it gets nightfall, like kiyom echad, or does it mean like one day, which is forbidden for a period of 24 hours? So the Gemara says, Tashma is being a raya mimostin from our Mishnah. What's the raya? Our Mishnah said, I'm taking that if I'm going to drink wine, hayoim, not yoim, hayoim today. Ain't no say will only give you event up until it gets dark. Now, the inference is, because you said, hayoim, the day, meaning today, which our day ends at nightfall. Hayoim, but if you say a day, oh, that would be kiyom echad, I'm saying one day. So it would be forbidden for 24 hours. And the Gemara says, no, in a sefer. Look at the next case of the Mishnah. Mishnah said, Omi Yom Echad, he says one day. Us and Yom Lim is forbidden for a period of 24 hours. That's because he said Yom Echad, one day. But Hayyom, he just said day. Kayemdam, it would be like today, which is only forbidden up until nightfall. So the one says, obviously, you cannot infer either way because you have contradictory inferences. So Rav Ashi says, Tashma Tzving arrived from Mishnah Daf Samach Gimel and Aleph. Mishnah says later on, someone takes a neder about wine that I'm going to taste this year. So if Nisab Rashona becomes the Ibriya, the year becomes extended, you have add Adar Sheni, you have another month, Asaba Bibuda. So the prohibition of the tasting wine for the year is including also the extended month of that year. Says the Gemara, what is the case of that Mishnah talking about? As Getin Tam of Samach Alf Menach. If it's like the words of the Mishnah are read, which it says Hashana, the year. So let me remember, then why would I need to say that? Obviously, since you said this year, it sounds like whatever the year is, including the extended month, because it's all part of this year. Elav, obviously the Mishnah must be talking about Damashana. You didn't say Hashana, you just said Shana. So obviously you see that Shana, Hashana Dami, that year is like this year. That it's all like 1 year, and you would not be forbidden in the, meaning, because if it was like Shana Achas, like 1 year, then actually you would not be forbidden in the leap year. You only forbidden for 12 months like most years are. From the fact that he's saying you're forbidden in the 13th month also, must be because Shana is like Hashana. Okay, so then take it to this. V'yem nami kayem dina. Then day should be like today. Says no, not necessarily. Truth is that the Mishnah over there didn't say Shana, he said Hashana. So we said, what's the chiddush? We said this year, of course. That means including the Ibri year. No, you say halachach Rav Hashem. You go after most years. Why would you go after most years? Meaning, at most years that don't have an extended month. And you say that even though he said Hashana, he should not be forbidden only as it is in most years. Why? So reason is because there's a chiddush that you're becoming forbidden in the extra month for someone who takes a net in the beginning of the year, where you would have thought to say that no, he should not be forbidden but 12 months like it is in most years. And v'lo yisbu ibur, most years don't have an extended month. Kamash malan, that's what telling you that he's been forbidden for 13 months because, and that's what the Ran explains, that the chiddush only if you took the net in the beginning of the year. If you took the net in Rosh Chodesh Shvat, obviously Hashanah would mean up until Rosh Hashanah. If you took it in the beginning of the year, I said this year, I thought a year is only 12 months. So even though they end up making it into a 13th month, they make it Ibriyah, that you would have thought to say maybe it should not be forbidden. That's Kamash Malan, that he's going to be forbidden for the extra month, and therefore you have no raya that Shana is like Hashana to say that Yom is like Kahayim, and therefore says the Ram Halacha, since the question is not resolved, we go stringently and we say that Yom is like Yom Echad, and therefore you can be forbidden not only until the evening, you can be forbidden all the way for a 24-hour period, thank you to any time for hosting us.